I stood there on my own porch, grocery bags cutting into my arms, as my key jammed uselessly in the lock. Through the glass, I saw my son walk by, calm, comfortable in the house I paid off. "We thought you'd be staying at Tina's," he said, like it was nothing. Behind him, Jenna smiled like she'd just won something. After 30 years of mortgage payments, double shifts and doing without, I was locked out of my own home. By my son. "Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe." The paper grocery bags pressed into Marjorie Bell's arms, cut into her skin, the sharp corners of cereal boxes and milk jugs digging at her as she trudged up the walkway. The summer heat in Raleigh clung to her like wet wool, sticky and heavy, but the familiar sight of her azalea bushes lining the porch usually softened the discomfort. This was her house, her safe place. She shifted the bags, reached into her pocket for her keys, and slid one into the brass lock she had turned 1,000 times before. It stopped short, her brow furrowed. She tried again, pushing harder, twisting left, then right. Nothing. The key scraped against metal that didn't belong to it. A chill rippled through her, sharp and foreign, cutting through the sticky heat. She tried the lock once more, her hand trembling now. When the deadbolt refused to budge, she pressed her forehead against the door and whispered, as though coaxing a child, "Come on, don't do this to me." Behind the door, she heard the muffled shuffle of footsteps. Relief surged until the door cracked open just enough to reveal Jenna's face. Jenna leaned against the frame, perfectly manicured nails tapping the wood. Her smirk spread slow and deliberate. "Oh," she said, drawing out the word like it was a game. "Derek changed the locks." Marjorie blinked, stunned. The air tasted metallic in her mouth. "Excuse me." From the hallway behind Jenna, Derek's voice floated forward, thick with impatience. "We thought you'd be staying at Tina's anyway." He appeared, filling the doorway with his broad frame, arms crossed as though this were some matter already settled. Marjorie shifted the bags in her arms. A carton of strawberries slipped free, tumbling to the welcome mat. She didn't bend to pick it up. She couldn't. Her legs felt rooted, heavy as stone. "This is my home," she said softly, her voice thin but steady. Derek's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping at the hinge. "You're retired, Mom. You don't need all this space. Jenna and I agreed it made sense for us to manage things here. You should be with your friend, someone who can keep you company." Company. The word stung like vinegar in an open wound. She stared at her son, searching for some trace of the boy who once pressed dandelions into her palms after school, grinning with teeth too big for his mouth. That boy was nowhere in sight. Jenna tilted her head, mock sympathy dripping from her voice. "We'll take good care of the place. Don't worry." The groceries dug deeper into Marjorie's arms, reminding her of their weight. Finally, she lowered them onto the porch with a quiet thud, the plastic milk jug sloshing inside the paper bag. Her hands felt suddenly free, but her chest hollowed with something sharp and devastating. "Move your things out of the fridge," Derek added, his tone dismissive. "We'll clear it if you don't." Marjorie didn't answer. She looked at him for one long moment, her lips pressed tight. Then, without another word, she turned away. The street hummed faintly with the drone of cicadas, a dog barking 2 houses down. Her sandals slapped against the cracked pavement of the driveway as she walked, head held level but eyes glassy. She left the strawberries bleeding red juice on the welcome mat, left the groceries sweating in the sun. Block after block passed beneath her feet, until the sight of Tina Long's flower-filled porch came into view. Yellow marigolds crowded the steps, cheerful and bright against the sagging wooden boards. The smell of honeysuckle drifted through the air, a scent so familiar it almost steadied her racing pulse. Marjorie climbed the steps slowly, gripping the railing. Her hand trembled now, not from age, not from weakness, but from a rage she couldn't yet name. She knocked once, then twice, the sound hollow against the door. Moments later the door opened. Tina, in her faded denim shirt and gardening gloves, took one look at her friend's face and froze. "He locked you out of your own house." Tina's voice cracked, half disbelief, half fury. The steam from the kettle curled into the kitchen air, sharp and herbal, carrying the faint bite of peppermint. Tina poured the boiling water into 2 heavy ceramic mugs, her movements brisk, purposeful. The clink of the spoon against porcelain was the only sound for a moment, but her eyes kept flicking toward Marjorie, who sat at the round oak table like a woman carved from stone. In front of her lay the thick navy binder Marjorie always kept in the hall closet, the binder that held her life on paper: bills, medical records, retirement statements, and at the very back, the deed to the house she had worked 30 years of double shifts to pay off. Marjorie's fingers lingered on the zipper, hesitant. Then, with a quiet exhale, she pulled it open. Pages rustled as she flipped, slow at first, then faster, until she reached the thick cream-colored sheet that smelled faintly of old ink and printer dust. Her name stood alone at the top, bold and unchallenged. Her throat tightened. "It's still mine," she whispered, as though needing to hear it aloud. Tina set a steaming mug in front of her and leaned over the document. Her sharp eyes scanned the page once, then a second time. When she looked back up, her voice carried steel. "Well, that makes this simple." Marjorie wrapped her hands around the mug, the heat grounding her, but her gaze stayed fixed on the paper, blurred slightly by the sting in her eyes. "He's still my son, Tina." The words were fragile, like glass set on the edge of a counter, one wrong move away from shattering. Tina tore off her gardening gloves and dropped them onto the table with a slap. "So, he's a 40-year-old man stealing your house. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal, Marge. If anything, it makes it worse." The truth of it struck hard, but it didn't erase the memory of Derek at 16, nervously asking her to sign his driver's permit, or at 9, crying when he scraped his knee on the sidewalk. She could still picture the cowlick he used to fight every morning, the way he once clung to her hand crossing the street. That boy was gone, but the echo of him pulled at her heart. She sipped her tea, the mint sharp on her tongue. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of the kitchen clock and the faint whistle of cicadas through the open window. Finally she set the mug down, her fingers leaving a damp ring on the table. "Then I guess I need a lawyer." Tina straightened, a satisfied glint in her eyes. "Now you're talking." Marjorie closed the binder with a firm zip, the sound louder than it should have been. Her decision wasn't neat or easy. It tasted bitter, like swallowing medicine she didn't want but needed. Yet beneath the bitterness was something steadier: resolve. Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, stared at the dark screen for a long moment, her reflection faint in the glass. Her thumb hovered, hesitated, then moved with purpose. She pulled up her contacts, scrolling past neighbors and old co-workers until she landed on a name she hadn't dialed in years: Russell Green. Her heart thudded as she typed, each word heavier than the last. "Are you still in practice? I need help." Her finger hovered one last second before pressing send. The message leapt off the screen, irrevocable. The kettle clicked off in the background, the sound final and sharp. Marjorie stared at the phone, waiting as the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. The hum of downtown Raleigh felt louder than usual, every passing bus and honking horn rattling Marjorie's nerves as she stepped out of her car. She clutched her binder like a shield, the edges biting into her palm as she scanned the row of aging brick buildings. Nestled between a bail bonds office and a pawn shop was a narrow doorway with faded lettering on the glass: Russell Green, Elder Law. The brass bell over the door jingled as she pushed it open. The air inside was cooler, calmer, tinged with the scent of old paper and lemon polish. The waiting room was small but tidy, 2 chairs against the wall, a ficus that had seen better days, and a framed diploma from UNC. Russell Green himself emerged from a back office, a tall man with thinning gray hair and a sharp gaze softened only slightly by the half-moon glasses perched on his nose. He carried a yellow legal pad under his arm. "Marjorie Bell," he said, a touch of surprise in his voice. "It's been a while." She managed a tight smile. "Too long, maybe. I wish I were here for better reasons." He gestured toward his office. "Let's get to it." The room beyond was modest. 2 bookcases stacked with law journals, a desk crowded with folders, and a computer monitor humming quietly. Russell motioned for her to sit while he lowered himself into a squeaky leather chair. He flipped his legal pad open, pen ready. "Tell me everything," he said. Marjorie opened the binder, the papers inside crisp and accusing. Her voice wavered at first, as she described the grocery bags, the lock that wouldn't turn, Jenna's smirk in the doorway. But as she spoke, the words found weight. She laid the facts down carefully, like stones in a river, each one solid enough to stand on. Russell didn't interrupt. He tapped the pen once against the pad, brows knitting tighter with every detail. When she finished, silence filled the room, punctuated only by the ticking of a wall clock. Finally he leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Is Derek's name on anything?" he asked. "Mortgage? Title? Insurance?" Marjorie shook her head firmly. "Not a word. It's mine. Always has been." The corners of Russell's mouth lifted into something that wasn't quite a smile, more a flash of satisfaction, like a chess player spotting checkmate. 3 moves ahead. He leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning. "Perfect," he said. "That makes this simple. We'll file an ownership restriction. That'll block anyone from making changes without your consent." Marjorie exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. The word perfect felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Russell swiveled toward his computer, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. The glow of the screen reflected in his glasses as he pulled up Wake County's title records. Lines of text filled the monitor, rows of legal filings, all neat and orderly. He scrolled until Marjorie's property appeared, her name standing alone like a sentinel. "There it is," he said, pointing with his pen. "Your deed, no amendments, no liens, no co-owners. Clean as a whistle." She leaned closer, heart thrumming as though seeing it in black and white confirmed what her soul had doubted since Derek shut her out. She was still the rightful owner. Russell leaned back again, tapping the pen against his pad. "We could stop there, but if you really want to shut this down," he let the sentence trail, letting the silence build tension. Marjorie raised her chin. "I want it airtight." His eyes sharpened. "Then we go further. Transfer the deed into a living trust. That way, no one, including your son, can touch it without going through you. It'll be bulletproof." She stared at him, the word trust echoing in her ears, the irony not lost on her. Trust had been broken, but maybe here, in this office, she could rebuild a different kind. Russell set the pen down, folded his hands, and fixed her with a level gaze. "The question is, Marjorie, do you want to change the deed tonight? We can file it at 9 a.m. sharp." The pen hovered above the paper, trembling just enough to betray the storm inside her. Marjorie stared at the blank signature line, the quitclaim deed spread out neatly across Russell Green's desk. The lamp cast a warm pool of light over the page, turning her name in print into something sharp and final. Her heart drummed in her ears. Signing meant severing more than just legal vulnerabilities. It meant admitting her son had turned into the kind of man she needed legal protection from. Russell leaned forward, calm but intent. "This is the last step. Once you sign, the house transfers into the trust. No court, no son, no scam can touch it." The leather chair creaked as she shifted. For a moment she imagined Derek at 12, balancing on a ladder while she steadied it, painting the shutters navy blue. He'd laughed when the brush splattered his cheek. Back then, she never would have thought she'd need a wall of paperwork to keep him out. Her grip tightened on the pen. She signed. Her name flowed across the line with steady finality, ink sinking deep into the paper. Russell took the document, stamped it, and affixed his notary seal with a deliberate clunk. The sound was decisive, like a gavel striking. He fed the pages into his scanner, the machine humming, as it swallowed up the evidence of her stand. "There," he said, turning the monitor so she could see the digital file queued for first thing in the morning. Filed at 9. Legally ironclad. For the first time in days, her chest loosened, not relief exactly, more like the faint glow of a lighthouse through fog. The office door creaked, and Tina slipped in, carrying a paper bag from the corner store. She pulled out a split of cheap champagne and 3 plastic cups. "Thought this deserved a toast," she said, her grin sharp as ever. Marjorie almost laughed. "Champagne for paperwork." "Not paperwork," Tina countered, twisting the cap until it popped with a cheerful snap. "For freedom." They clinked their cups together, the bubbles biting at Marjorie's tongue. She let herself smile, just barely, the corners of her mouth softening as she swallowed. The celebration was short-lived. Her phone buzzed on the desk, rattling against the wood. The name Jenna glared across the screen. Marjorie's hand hovered before she swiped the message open. "You left food in the fridge. Should we toss it?" The audacity of it hit her like a slap. After locking her out of her own house, Jenna was worried about leftovers. Marjorie typed slowly, every word deliberate. "Keep it. You'll need it." She set the phone down with finality, ignoring the 3 pulsing dots that appeared almost immediately in reply. Russell arched a brow. "Everything all right?" She met his gaze, her voice steady. "Better than it's been in a long time." The 3 of them sat together in the quiet office, the champagne fizzing softly, the scanner's light blinking as it confirmed the upload. Outside, Rowley's traffic rumbled, indifferent to the small revolution happening behind the glass door. That night, Marjorie stayed at Tina's. She didn't sleep much, but it wasn't fear that kept her awake. It was the strange new stillness inside her. By morning she was up before sunrise, sitting on Tina's porch as dew clung to the flowers, the air cool and clean. At exactly 9 o'clock, her phone rang. Russell's voice came through, steady and matter-of-fact. "Deed filed. It's legally yours again, fully protected." Marjorie closed her eyes, a slow breath slipping out as though she'd been holding it for years. The weight of uncertainty eased, but before she could savor it, her phone chimed again. A voicemail notification. Derek's voice, low and tight with anger, spilled into her ear. "We have a problem." The morning sun burned hot across Tina Long's backyard, spilling over rows of marigolds and hydrangeas that Marjorie had been tending with quiet precision. Her hands, gloved and steady, worked the soil around the base of a stubborn rose bush, the earthy scent rising warm in the summer air. Gardening had always calmed her, a ritual of order and patience in a world that had grown unruly. But the calm didn't last. The sound of tires crunching against gravel snapped her head up. A black SUV screeched to a stop by the curb. Derek climbed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. He strode toward her with the clumsy force of a man already wound too tight, fists balled, jaw clenched. "Mom," he barked, his voice cutting through the morning like a blade. Marjorie straightened slowly, brushing dirt from her gloves. She didn't answer. Not yet. She let him come closer, his shadow stretching long across the grass. Derek jabbed a finger at her, his face flushed with anger. "We just assumed you were done with the house. You retired. You moved in with Tina. You're not living there anymore. Jenna and I thought it made sense to transition things." Marjorie's lips pressed into a thin line. She removed her gloves with deliberate care, folding them once then again before tucking them into her apron pocket. Only then did she look him squarely in the eye. "You assumed wrong." The words landed with the weight of stone. Derek flinched, but quickly masked it with a sneer. "You can't just cut me out," he snapped. "That house is mine as much as yours. I grew up there. I've invested my time, my sweat." "Your sweat?" Marjorie's voice sharpened, but stayed calm. "You mean the roof I replaced, the taxes I paid, the mortgage I carried for 30 years. That house isn't yours, Derek. It never was." He stepped closer, close enough that the scent of his cologne, too strong, too sharp, cut through the earthy garden air. "I'll contest it. I'll drag this through court if I have to. Don't think a judge will side with you forever. You're not getting younger." From the porch, Tina's voice cut through, dry and hard-edged. "Careful, Derek. You sound like a man threatening his own mother. Not a good look." Marjorie bent to pick up a manila envelope resting on the patio chair. She pulled out a crisp set of documents, their edges neat, the ink still fresh. Without hesitation she thrust them into Derek's chest. "Here," she said. The trust documents, my name, my terms, my house. It's locked tighter than you'll ever be able to break. Derek grabbed the papers, his hands clumsy with fury. His eyes darted over the legal language, his lips moving silently as he read, confusion flashing to disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded. "Protection," Marjorie replied simply. On the porch, Tina raised her phone, the small red recording light glowing. "Just so we're clear," she called, "this whole conversation is on video. Don't try to rewrite history later." Derek's face darkened, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You think a few papers and a camera can stop me? I've got more options than you think." Marjorie didn't flinch. She leaned closer, her voice soft but unyielding. "And I have fewer fears than you realize." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the drone of cicadas and the distant hum of a lawnmower down the street. Derek's nostrils flared, his knuckles white around the envelope. Then, with a furious shake of his head, he turned and stalked back toward the SUV. The slam of the car door echoed down the block as he peeled away, tires spitting gravel into the road. Tina lowered her phone, muttering, "He's unraveling faster than I expected." Marjorie didn't answer. She just stared at the roses she'd been tending, their thorns glinting in the sunlight. She knew Derek wasn't finished. Men like him never walked away, they doubled back. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, vibrating against her hip. She pulled it out, expecting another venom-laced message from Jenna. Instead, it was Russell. She answered. His voice came through tight, clipped, more urgent than she'd ever heard it. "Marjorie," he said, "we've got a serious problem. Derek just tried to file a forged deed claiming joint ownership." Russell's voice was still echoing in her ear, when Marjorie sank into Tina's porch chair, the phone trembling against her palm. A forged deed. Her son had crossed from betrayal into crime. "I'll take care of it immediately," Russell said. His tone was steady, but the clipped edge gave away his disgust. "I'll file a fraud alert and lock the record so no one can tamper again." By the time Marjorie hung up, Russell was already on the move. In the cool hum of the Wake County Recorder's office, Patricia Nunez tapped at her keyboard, the glow of the monitor painting her face. She had seen her share of messy family squabbles and property filing, divorces, greedy siblings, neighbors disputing fences. But this, she pulled up Derek Bell's attempted submission, a scanned form attached with a shaky digital signature. Her lips curled. Sloppy. Didn't even spell his own middle name right. She clicked a few more keys, attaching the fraud alert Russell had pushed through. A red banner appeared across the file, flagged, "Potential fraud." Patricia printed the bogus deed, slid it into a manila envelope, and muttered to herself, "Not today, sunshine." The system automatically generated a warning letter, addressed straight to Derek's mailbox. Back at Tina's, Marjorie tried to keep her hands busy, snapping beans at the kitchen counter, rinsing them until her fingers pruned, but the tremor wouldn't leave her wrists. Tina slammed a cupboard and pulled out her car key. "Enough moping. We're going to lunch. Call it a victory lap for legal self-defense." An hour later they sat in a diner booth near downtown, sunlight pouring through the blinds in sharp golden slats. The air smelled of coffee and fried chicken, a comfort Marjorie hadn't realized she needed. She sipped her iced tea while Tina raised her burger like a trophy. "Cheers to you," Tina said, her voice muffled around a bite. "You've got more grit than half this town. Most folks would have folded." Marjorie smiled faintly, though her eyes lingered on the parking lot, half expecting Derek's SUV to screech in at any moment. "It doesn't feel like winning. Not yet." Tina shrugged. "It will." Her phone buzzed against the table, and for a moment she froze. Then she turned it over. Not Derek. Not Russell. Jenna Bell posted a status update. Against her better judgment, Marjorie tapped. The words glared back at her, sad to see elder confusion and mismanagement tear families apart. Some people just aren't capable of making sound decisions anymore. A hot flush spread through Marjorie's chest, but she didn't flinch. She set down her glass, wiped her fingers, and opened her own page. Her hands didn't shake as she typed. Only 4 words. Not confused. Just done. She hit post. Within minutes the comments began, neighbors chiming in with support, old co-workers sending hearts, a church friend replying, "We see you, Mard." Tina leaned over, reading aloud with a chuckle. "Oh, that's gonna sting Jenna right in her veneers." Marjorie let the faintest smile curl her lips, though her stomach stayed taut, braced for whatever came next. At the Wake County Recorder's office, Patricia was shutting down her computer when the lobby doors flew open. The air conditioner gusted hard, rattling the blinds. Derek stormed inside, suit jacket wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from a night of plotting. He slapped a hand against the counter. "I demand a hearing," he shouted, his voice booming across the quiet office. Heads turned, clerks froze mid-step, the sound of paper shuffling falling into silence. Patricia didn't even blink. She lifted her glasses, met his glare, and said coolly, "Mr. Bell, you're already flagged for fraud." Derek's nostrils flared, but he leaned forward, knuckles white on the counter. "Then I'll fight it in person." The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and dust, the kind of scent that clung to every county building in Raleigh. Marjorie sat at the polished oak table beside Russell Green, her binder neatly stacked in front of her like a soldier at attention. Her palms were dry now, not clammy. An odd calm had settled in. After everything, this was just another step. The bailiff called the case, his voice echoing across the high ceiling. Bell versus Bell. The words sliced through her chest. Hearing her own name paired against her son's felt like a wound made public. Russell rose first, sliding a packet of documents across the table with the smooth confidence of a man who had played this game for decades. "Title history, Your Honor," he said, his tone crisp but not theatrical. 30 years of ownership, mortgage-free, and most recently, a living trust filed last week. All legally binding. Marjorie opened the binder when he gestured, revealing the notarized papers, the seals shining under the fluorescent lights. The judge scanned them briefly before nodding. The back doors creaked open. Derek stumbled in, late, his tie askew and his face flushed with sweat. He carried nothing but his phone, which he shoved into his pocket as though realizing too late how unprepared he looked. "Sorry, traffic," he muttered, sliding into the opposite seat. The judge didn't bother to respond. "Do you have any supporting documents, Mr. Bell?" Derek's jaw worked. "Just my testimony." Russell arched a brow, the faintest smile tugging his lips. "We also have video evidence," he said smoothly. He pressed play on a small tablet. Tina's voice filled the room, sharp and unflinching. "Careful, Derek. You sound like a man threatening his own mother." The judge's gaze hardened as Derek's voice sputtered across the screen, full of entitlement and anger. Derek shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the benches where a few curious neighbors sat, whispering behind their hands. "This is ridiculous," Derek snapped, his voice rising. "That's my house. I grew up there." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "You have no legal claim." "None. This case is dismissed." He banged the gavel once, decisive as thunder. It was over in minutes. Marjorie rose slowly, gathering her papers with steady hands. She didn't look at Derek as she walked past him, didn't need to. His silence, his clenched fists on the table, spoke louder than any tantrum. In the hallway, the air felt lighter, almost sweet, with the scent of someone's perfume drifting past. Darlene Jenkins, a neighbor with a sun hat tucked under her arm, reached out as Marjorie passed. "You handled that like a queen," Darlene said warmly. Her smile carried both pride and warning. We know." Marjorie's chest swelled, not with triumph, but with something steadier, dignity, carved out of pain. Outside, the sun beat down on the asphalt. Russell patted her shoulder. "That's one fire out," he said. "But keep your guard up. He's the type who hates losing more than he fears consequences." Marjorie nodded, sliding her binder back into her tote bag. She didn't need reminding. Later that afternoon, she stopped for gas. As she stepped out of the car, the pump's beeping filled the air, sharp against the steady hum of traffic. Across the lot, Jenna stood by her SUV, sunglasses perched high, scrolling her phone as if the world around her didn't exist. For a moment, their eyes nearly met. But Jenna turned away quickly, her posture stiff, her shoulders sharp with resentment. She busied herself with her purse, refusing to look at the woman she had tried to erase. Marjorie filled her tank in silence, the smell of gasoline heavy in the hot air. She slid back into the driver's seat, her dignity intact, her silence sharper than any words. When she pulled into Tina's driveway an hour later, the first thing she noticed was the garden gate. It hung crooked, the wood splintered in half, shards of paint curling outward like torn skin. Her breath caught. The garden gate lay in ruins. Splintered wood sprawled across the walkway, like bones, the hinges twisted and dangling, one side hanging by a rusted screw. Marjorie bent slowly, her knees aching, and brushed her fingertips over the jagged edge. The fresh break still smelled faintly of raw pine. Whoever had done it hadn't just broken a gate, they'd sent a message. She pulled out her phone, the afternoon light glaring on the screen as she snapped picture after picture. Each click of the shutter felt like evidence, like armor. With practiced precision, she attached the photos to an email and typed quickly, "Russell, see attached. Damage to property. Likely Derek." Within minutes his reply came back. "Good. Document everything. Police next." Marjorie dialed the non-emergency line, her voice steady as she reported the vandalism. She gave details, times, her suspicion without embellishment. When she hung up, a weariness settled over her, heavier than the July heat pressing down on the neighborhood. Tina appeared with her toolbox, slamming it down on the porch. "If he thinks he can scare you, he picked the wrong woman," she muttered. She pulled out a set of motion-activated lights, their white casings gleaming in the sunlight. Together the women worked along the eaves, Tina steady on the ladder while Marjorie handed up screws and batteries. Sweat trickled down Marjorie's back, mixing with the smell of cut grass from the neighbor's yard. When the final light snapped into place, Tina climbed down and dusted off her hands. "There," she said. "Let him try creeping around now. He'll light up like a Christmas display." Marjorie allowed herself the smallest laugh, though the tension in her shoulders never eased. She glanced at the shattered gate again, knowing Derek wouldn't stop at wood and nails. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. She answered, and Patricia Nunez's voice came warm but cautious. "Mrs. Bell? This is Patricia from the recorder's office. I thought you should know, someone placed an unusual inquiry on your tax documents. I flagged it because it didn't look routine." Marjorie's stomach dropped. "Who?" Patricia hesitated before answering. The request came under Jenna Bell's name. She was trying to access property tax information enough to pose as an owner. Marjorie closed her eyes, pinching the bridge of her nose. The image of Jenna's smirk in her doorway replayed, now sharper, meaner. "Thank you, Patricia," she whispered. When she relayed it to Russell, he didn't waste time. "That's attempted fraud again," he said flatly. "I'll draft a cease and desist order. She wants to play games? She'll get the law in her inbox." By the afternoon, the order was sent. Russell's email to Jenna was short, clinical, and unflinching. "Any further attempt to manipulate or misrepresent ownership of the Bell property will result in immediate legal action." Marjorie read it twice, a strange satisfaction curling in her chest. Finally, it felt like someone was standing between her and the chaos. But peace never lasted long. Scrolling through her phone that evening, she caught sight of Jenna's latest social media post, a glossy stock photo of a living room suspiciously similar to hers, captioned "Charming Raleigh Rental, available for short stays." Marjorie's pulse hammered. She clicked the link only to find the page had already vanished, taken down as quickly as it went up. Still, the intent was clear. Jenna wasn't giving up. She crafted her own quiet rebuttal, a single-line post sharp as glass. "Not for rent. Trespassers will be reported." Her neighbors liked it instantly, the virtual nods of solidarity pouring in. But solidarity couldn't stop the gnawing dread that grew inside her, as steady as weeds in a garden. The following morning, Marjorie stepped outside with her coffee, steam curling in the cool air. For a moment the yard was calm. birds perched on the fence, the roses she'd pruned standing tall despite the broken gate. She almost let herself breathe easy. Then she saw it. A white plastic sign stuck into her front lawn, bold letters glaring against the grass. For rent. Her mug slipped in her hands, hot coffee splashing over her fingers. The plastic sign mocked her from the lawn, bold black letters screaming for rent against the dew-damp grass. Marjorie set her coffee mug on the porch rail, her fingers still stinging from yesterday's spill. With a sharp tug, she yanked the sign out of the earth. The post snapped free, leaving behind a raw hole in the soil, like someone had tried to stake a claim on her life. Her pulse hammered as she read the phone number stenciled beneath the bold letters. She pulled out her cell, the morning air thick with birdsong and the faint smell of wet mulch. The line rang 3 times before a voice answered. Bell Rentals, came Jenna's smooth, practiced tone. Marjorie's grip tightened around the signpost. "It's me," she said, "and this house is not for rent." Silence, then the faint hiss of air through the receiver. Jenna's voice dropped an octave. "You're overreacting. It's just a listing, no harm in putting out feelers." "No harm?" Marjorie's words cut like glass. "This is fraud, Jenna. My property, my name, my house." She didn't wait for a reply. She ended the call, the click final, and tossed the sign onto the driveway like the trash it was. But suspicion gnawed at her. She needed confirmation, someone beyond Russell or Patricia. She scrolled her contacts until she found the number. Maya Sterling, a sharp-eyed real estate investigator she'd crossed paths with during a neighborhood dispute the year before. Maya answered on the second ring. "Marjorie Bell, haven't heard from you in a while." "There's a listing," Marjorie said without preamble. "My house." "Jenna's number. Can you check if anything's been filed?" Keys clacked on the other end of the line, fast and sure. "Give me a second." "Okay, nothing in the system. No listing, no MLS entry, not even a placeholder. This isn't just shady, it's illegal." Marjorie closed her eyes, steadying herself. "That's what I thought. Want my advice?" Maya's voice softened. "Make it loud. Let the neighborhood know it's a scam. Sunlight kills this kind of rot." That afternoon, Marjorie logged onto her community forum and her social page. She typed slowly, deliberately, "House is not for rent. Trespassers will be reported." The message spread like wildfire. Comments poured in, neighbors offering support, tagging one another, promising to keep an eye out. Some even screenshot Jenna's fake ad and shared it back with captions like "Scam Alert." The solidarity steadied Marjorie's heart. For once she wasn't fighting in silence. Russell didn't waste time either. He drafted a formal fraud complaint to the North Carolina Real Estate Board, attaching copies of the cease and desist order and screenshots of Jenna's Bell Rentals ad. "They'll open an ethics inquiry," he told Marjorie over the phone. "This goes beyond family drama. It's professional misconduct." Patricia followed suit at the recorder's office, adding another lock on Marjorie's property file. "No one touches this house without your say-so," she said. "It's airtight now." Marjorie thanked her, a lump rising in her throat. One by one, people who owed her nothing were standing guard where her own son had failed her. That evening she stepped outside to water her roses and stopped short. The block looked different. Bright neon paper signs dotted the fences, telephone poles, and front yards around her property. "Do not trespass. House not for rent." Neighbors had planted them like banners, circling her home in a protective ring. The hum of sprinklers and the rustle of leaves filled the quiet, but underneath was something stronger: community resolve. Tina appeared at her side, a hammer in hand. "Looks like the whole street's on your team now." For the first time in weeks, Marjorie let herself laugh. A full, unguarded laugh that rolled through the evening air. The relief didn't last. The next morning, Russell called again, his voice carrying a grim satisfaction. "You'll want to hear this. Jenna's firm just terminated her. Official notice went out this morning. Ethics violations. Your case tipped the scales." Marjorie stood frozen on the porch, hose dripping water onto her sandals. Her daughter-in-law had just lost everything. The email hit the neighborhood forum before the news made it official. Jenna Bell's firm had issued a terse press release, termination effective immediately due to ethics violations. No elaboration, no softened edges, the kind of public cut that left no room for return. By the next morning, whispers filled the diner, where Marjorie and Tina sometimes stopped for coffee. People leaned over booths, voices dropping low but tinged with glee. "Did you hear? Jenna lost her license." The smell of bacon and toast lingered in the air, but the gossip was sharper, almost electric. Marjorie sat silently, stirring her coffee. She hadn't wanted Jenna destroyed, only stopped. But once reputations cracked, they crumbled fast. Jenna tried to salvage what she could. On her social page, she wrote a lengthy post in polished libellese, blaming family stress for her actions. She painted herself as a woman burdened by caretaking, hinting at Marjorie's supposed fragility and the strain of stepping in. The comments were not kind. Strangers dissected her excuses. Neighbors reposted Marjorie's simple rebuttal. Not confused, just done. Jenna's narrative sank under its own weight, each word of deflection another stone dragging her down. Marjorie read the post once, then closed the app. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The truth was doing it for her. Derek, however, took a different approach. A new link appeared in group chats and on community boards, a GoFundMe with a pleading headline, "Help us save our family home." The photo made Marjorie's stomach twist. It was the house she had built her life inside, framed by azaleas, now repurposed as a prop for her son's begging bowl. The description claimed they'd been unfairly displaced and were struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Tina stormed into Marjorie's kitchen, waving her phone. "Can you believe this garbage? He's trying to scam the whole neighborhood." Marjorie set down her teacup with calm precision. "Let him. People can tell the truth from a con." Instead of donating to Derek's fund, Marjorie clicked over to the Raleigh Housing Shelter's website. With a few quiet keystrokes, she gave a sizable gift under her own name. The receipt popped into her inbox, stark and satisfying. If her money was going anywhere, it would be to people who truly needed it. In the days that followed, the community rallied around her in quieter, more tangible ways. Neighbors came by with shovels and gloves, helping Tina refresh Marjorie's flower beds. Children pulled weeds, laughter drifting across the yard, while older residents brought trays of lemonade and cookies. Marjorie knelt beside the soil, her hands pressing into the earth. For the first time in months, she felt rooted again, not just in the property, but in the people who refused to let her stand alone. Russell stopped by one afternoon, carrying a folder under his arm, and his usual no-nonsense expression. "Good news and precautions," he said, taking a seat at her kitchen table. He slid a brochure toward her. "Home security packages, motion sensors, cameras, insurance coverage." Derek's desperate Russell explained. "That makes him sloppy, but also unpredictable. Get the system installed, and I'd recommend legal insurance on top. Protect yourself on all fronts." Marjorie studied the glossy images of sleek doorbell cameras and keypad locks. It felt strange, fortifying her life like a fortress, but Russell was right. Peace required protection now. "Do it," she said firmly. That night, she returned to a habit she'd abandoned years ago. She pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowing but still sturdy. The first entry came slow, her handwriting shaky, but soon the words flowed steady. "He changed the locks. I changed the deed. What he doesn't know is that I've also changed myself." The scratching of the pen was soothing, each sentence a reclaiming of voice. She wrote until the page filled, until her chest felt lighter. The next morning, she opened her mailbox. Inside lay a thick envelope stamped with Derek's name. She tore it open, the paper crinkling sharply in her hands. Her eyes scanned the first line, and her stomach dropped. Notice of legal action, petition for filial support. Her son was suing her, claiming she owed him money, simply for being his mother. The envelope still lay open on the table when Russell arrived. He skimmed the petition with a frown, flipping through the pages as if each word was a personal insult. His pen tapped against the margin, sharp and rhythmic. Filial support, he muttered. North Carolina does have a dusty old statute on the books, but it hasn't been enforced in years. This won't go far, Marjorie. But it's annoying. He's trying to turn you into his bank account. Marjorie's stomach twisted. He's suing me for being his mother. Russell set the papers down with finality. He's suing you for being independent of him. Don't worry, we'll make it quick. The courthouse smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. Marjorie walked between Tina and Patricia, their presence steadying her. Tina carried a tote bag stuffed with snacks and knitting needles, as if she dared the day to drag out. Patricia, in her pressed blazer, looked like she belonged behind the counter rather than in the benches, her sharp eyes missing nothing. When they entered the hearing room, Derek was already there. His suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, but his posture was tall, as if he believed sheer arrogance could carry the case. He didn't glance at Marjorie, didn't acknowledge the woman he was dragging into court. The judge entered, robes sweeping, gavel striking once. The case was called. Russell rose with calm authority, handing over neatly stacked exhibits, Marjorie's retirement statements, trust documents, proof of her self-sufficiency. Mrs. Bell has no financial reliance on her son, he explained evenly. This claim is meritless. It's harassment dressed up as law. The judge flipped through the papers, eyebrows arching as he landed on Derek's thin packet of evidence, a single typed sheet claiming he'd invested time in the family home. Mr. Bell, the judge said, voice flat. What exactly are you asking for here? Derek leaned forward. Filial support, Your Honor. She has the means, I don't. I gave years of my life to that house. Doesn't that count? The silence in the courtroom was thick, broken only by the squeak of Patricia's chair as she shifted. The judge set the page down, expression hard. No, what counts is financial independence. Your mother's finances are her own. This statute isn't a tool for disgruntled children to demand money. Case dismissed. The gavel struck, the sound echoing like thunder. Derek's mouth opened, but the judge raised a hand sharply. And Mr. Bell, the judge added, his voice firm, consider this a warning. Any further frivolous filings against your mother may result in sanctions. Do I make myself clear? Derek's jaw tightened. He gave a stiff nod. Marjorie exhaled slowly, relief washing through her in quiet waves. She gathered her papers without looking at her son. Walking out of the courtroom, she felt taller somehow, not triumphant, but resolute. Outside, the spring air was bright, filled with the sound of birds nesting in the courthouse trees. Neighbors were waiting. Darlene waved, and others from the street gathered around, clapping her shoulder, murmuring words of praise. You stood firm, one said. You showed him, said another. That evening, Tina hosted a small gathering in Marjorie's backyard. String lights glowed above the flower beds, and the scent of grilled chicken mingled with lilac blossoms. Children darted through the grass while adults raised plastic cups of sweet tea. Marjorie sat at the patio table, watching it unfold, the life she'd built, defended, and now shared with those who respected her. Tina appeared with a wooden plaque, the words carved neatly across it, owner, not occupant. Marjorie laughed, a genuine unguarded sound. She ran her fingers over the letters, the wood smooth under her touch. This is perfect, she said softly. Later that night, when the house was quiet again, Marjorie sifted through her mail. Among the flyers and bills lay a plain white envelope, handwritten in careful script. She slid it open, expecting another threat. Instead, her eyes caught the first line. Marjorie, I regret what happened. It was signed by Jenna. The paper was thick, expensive, smelling faintly of lavender, Jenna's attempt to dress up contrition in perfume and polish. Her eyes traced the sentences carefully, each one a calculated blend of sorrow and justification. Jenna claimed she had acted under unbearable family pressure, that stress had clouded her judgment, that she hoped Marjorie could find it in her heart to reconsider reconciliation. Marjorie folded the paper neatly in half and set it on the kitchen table. Her tea had gone cold, a thin skin forming at the top, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she stared out the window at the yard, where Tina was on her knees pulling weeds. Life moved on out there. Fresh soil, Clean air, birdsong. In here Jenna was asking her to turn backward. When Tina came in, wiping dirt from her hands, she spotted the envelope. "What's that?" "An apology," Marjorie said. Her voice was flat, unreadable. Tina snorted. "A little late for that, don't you think?" Marjorie picked up the letter again, ran her fingers across Jenna's neat handwriting, then set it back down. "She doesn't want reconciliation. She wants access, to me, to the house, to control. And you're not giving it," Tina said firmly. Marjorie looked at her friend and smiled faintly. "Peace doesn't require proximity." The next morning, Russell met her at his office. The leather chairs squeaked as they sat, the faint hum of the air conditioner filling the space. "I want a permanent restraining order," Marjorie said without prémoumen. "Derek's name. No more loopholes. No more second chances." Russell studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Clean. Direct." He drafted the request swiftly, the clack of his keyboard steady and decisive. By the end of the week, the judge signed the order. Derek was legally barred from contacting or approaching her. The paper carried more weight than chains. But Russell didn't stop there. He opened her trust documents, flipping through page after page. "We'll reinforce the language. Tighten every clause. Eliminate any ambiguity. When I'm finished, this trust will be bulletproof. Derek won't get so much as a nail from your porch." Marjorie watched him work, the relief in her chest heavy and strange. Protection didn't erase betrayal, but it built walls strong enough to stand behind. That evening, she carried Jenna's letter to the backyard. The air smelled faintly of lilacs, the sky painted orange and purple with sunset. She knelt beside the fire pit, her hands steady now. She unfolded the letter one last time, her eyes scanning the words that had once cut. Then with deliberate calm, she touched the corner to the flame. The paper curled, blackened, the lavender scent replaced by the acrid tang of smoke. The words disappeared line by line, until only ashes remained, glowing faintly in the twilight. Tina joined her, a glass of sweet tea in hand. "Feels better, doesn't it?" Marjorie nodded, watching the ashes scatter. "Final," she said. "At last." The phone rang inside, startling the quiet. Marjorie brushed soot from her hands and answered. Patricia's voice came through the line, warm but brimming with energy. "Marjorie, I hope you're sitting down," Patricia said. Marjorie frowned, sinking into the kitchen chair. "What is it?" "You're being nominated for the County Elder Rights Award. They want to honor you at the spring banquet." The words hung in the air, unreal. Marjorie stared at the ashes still glowing faintly outside. She had fought for survival, for peace, for dignity, and now the county wanted to make her a symbol. The clatter of silverware and the soft murmur of conversation filled the banquet hall at the Raleigh Civic Center. Marjorie sat at a round table near the front, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the linen tablecloth patterned with faint blue roses. The smell of coffee and warm biscuits drifted across the room, mingling with the faint tang of polished wood floors and floral perfume. She hadn't wanted this. Public recognition had never been her language. She'd built her life in small gestures, bandaging wounds in the hospital, clipping roses in the garden, dropping casseroles on neighbors' porches. But now the announcer at the podium was calling her name. Marjorie Bell, recipient of this year's Wake County Elder Rights Award. Applause rose, sharp and insistent. Chairs scraped as people stood, their hands clapping in unison. The sound filled the hall, rolling over her like a wave she couldn't step back from. Tina was already on her feet, whistling loud enough to turn heads. Patricia clapped with a grin that carried pride, while Russell simply nodded, his quiet approval steady as always. Marjorie stood, her legs shaky, and made her way to the stage. The plaque they handed her gleamed beneath the spotlights, her name etched in brass. She held it awkwardly, staring at it as though it belonged to someone else. At the microphone, silence fell. All eyes were on her. Her heart thudded in her chest, and for a moment she considered saying nothing at all. But then the words came, simple and unadorned. "Protect your peace. she said, her voice clear, carrying across the room. Even from your own blood. There was no flourish, no long explanation, just truth. The applause came again, stronger this time, with a standing ovation that rattled the silverware on the tables. Marjorie stepped down, relief settling over her shoulders like a shawl. The next morning, the local paper arrived on Tina's porch. Marjorie unfolded it slowly, the ink still sharp on her fingers. There on the front of the lifestyle section was her face, lined and dignified, with a headline that made her blink. The quiet landlord who said no. The article detailed her story in broad strokes: a retired nurse who defended her home, stood against family pressure, and became a local symbol of elder rights. They hadn't used Derek's or Jenna's names, thankfully, but the message was clear. She folded the paper carefully and set it aside. It wasn't about the headline, it was about survival. Later, on the patio, Tina dabbed at her eyes with the corner of her shirt. Lord Marge, you've got half the county applauding you. Next stop, City Council. She laughed through her tears, but her voice cracked with pride. Marjorie chuckled softly, shaking her head. One fight was enough. Let someone else run for office. Russell arrived not long after, his suit jacket draped over his arm, his tie loosened. He gave her a quick, firm hug, something uncharacteristic for his measured nature. You taught half this room what boundaries look like, he said. His tone wasn't sentimental. It was factual, grounded, like he was reciting evidence. Marjorie's throat tightened. For so long, she'd felt like the ground under her feet was slipping away. Now, she stood firm, held by people who understood. That afternoon, a delivery van pulled up. The driver carried a vase of fresh lilies and daisies, their scent filling the kitchen as soon as Marjorie lifted the lid. Tucked into the bouquet was a card, handwritten, from all of us at the shelter. Thank you for remembering us when it counted. Marjorie set the flowers on her kitchen counter, touched by their brightness against the pale tile. She inhaled their fragrance, sweet and grounding, and for a moment allowed herself to feel proud. That night, the house was still. Tina had gone home, Russell had left for his evening jog, and Patricia had promised to check in the next day. Marjorie curled up in her armchair with her journal, the plaque leaning quietly against the wall. A soft knock startled her. It wasn't late, but the sun had dipped low, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. She hesitated, then rose, her slippers whispering against the hard wood. When she opened the door, she froze. On the porch stood Miles, Derek and Jenna's teenage son, his backpack hung off one shoulder, his face pale and tired. "Grandma," he said softly, "Dad lied to me. About everything." The porch light glowed softly, casting a halo around Miles' tired face. His voice cracked as he repeated the words, "Dad lied to me. About everything." His backpack sagged against his shoulder, straps frayed, as though he had carried too much weight for too long. Marjorie studied him for a long moment, her hands resting lightly on the doorframe. She didn't rush to fill the silence. Sometimes truth needed space to breathe. Finally, she gave a single, deliberate nod. "Come inside," she said. "We'll have tea." The kettle hissed on the stove as Miles sat at the kitchen table, shoulders hunched, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. He didn't fidget, didn't scroll a phone like most teenagers. He just sat, waiting as though afraid the invitation might be revoked. Marjorie set 2 mugs down, steam curling upward, peppermint filling the air. She slid one across the table and joined him. No promises were made, no absolution offered, only tea. For a while they sipped in silence. The tick of the kitchen clock grew loud, a metronome for all the words unspoken. At last Miles looked up, his eyes raw. "Dad told me you were confused, that you couldn't handle things anymore, that he and Mom were fixing everything. But then I saw the article in the paper, your speech, people cheering for you." He swallowed hard. It didn't match what he said. Marjorie rested her palms on the warm ceramic of her mug. Sometimes people lie because they're afraid of the truth. Sometimes they lie because the truth doesn't give them what they want. Miles' lip trembled, but he nodded. I don't want to be like him. Later they carried their tea to the back patio. Fireflies blinked among the flower beds, and the faint smell of jasmine drifted through the humid night. The garden lights Tina had installed glowed soft along the fence, turning the yard into a haven. Miles leaned back in his chair, staring at the blooms. I want to do something that matters, he said quietly. Not chasing money, not hurting people, something good. He hesitated, then added, I want to volunteer at that shelter you help. I read about it after I saw your name in the paper. Marjorie's chest tightened. She didn't speak right away, just let the words settle. It was not a promise she had expected to hear from Derek's son. Finally she nodded, her voice steady. That's work worth doing. Miles managed a small smile, the first she'd seen on his face since he arrived. Inside the house, her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it and saw a text from Tina, who must have noticed the extra shadow on the porch. Branch skipped the tree. Huh. Marjorie allowed herself the faintest smile, her eyes lifting to Miles's silhouette against the glow of the garden. Maybe Tina was right. Maybe a new branch could grow without carrying the rot of the trunk. When the evening wound down, Miles carried his mug to the sink without being asked. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, backpack still slung over one shoulder. Thanks for letting me come here, he said. Marjorie simply nodded. She didn't tell him he was welcome anytime, didn't offer the easy comfort of guarantees. Trust once broken would not be rebuilt overnight. But she hadn't closed the door either. After he left, the house fell quiet again. Marjorie returned to her chair, pulled her leather-bound journal onto her lap, and uncapped her pen. The words came slowly at first, then with certainty. It's time to rewrite my will. She turned to a fresh page, the lamplight catching the edges of her handwriting. Her pen pressed firm, shaping a future where one name would be added and another erased. The ink flowed smoothly, steady against the cream page, as Marjorie signed her name at the bottom of her new will. She didn't hesitate this time. The pen felt lighter in her hand than it had months ago, as though the burden had already lifted. Russell slid the papers into a crisp folder, his movements deliberate. There it is, he said. Final. Miles is now listed. Derek's name is erased. Between the trust and this, your house and your wishes are untouchable. Marjorie pressed her palm against the folder for a moment, as if sealing it with more than ink. Thank you, she whispered. Russell gave a small nod, his voice firm but kind. You did this, Marjorie. I just wrote it down. That afternoon, the air was cool and bright, the faint smell of pine drifting from the woods at the edge of the neighborhood. Marjorie walked her property with Tina at her side, their shoes crunching over fallen leaves. The roses she had fought so hard to protect glowed in the late sun, their thorns sharp but their petals open and bold. The broken gate had been repaired, stronger than before, the wood new and solid. Tina breathed deeply, hands on her hips. Smells like peace, she said with a grin. Marjorie let her fingers trail along the fence post, the texture smooth beneath her touch. Smells like mine. They stood together in the quiet, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. For once the silence carried no threat, only rest. Later Patricia stopped by. She carried a wooden frame, wrapped in brown paper. Thought you should have this, she said, setting it on the kitchen counter. Marjorie unwrapped it carefully. Inside was her County Elder Rights Award, the brass plaque mounted against rich walnut. The inscription gleamed, for strength, integrity, and boundaries. Patricia smiled warmly. You've earned every letter of that. Marjorie ran her hand across the smooth glass. She didn't need accolades, but the weight of it in her arms reminded her that her fight had mattered beyond her own walls. In the front yard, Miles worked beside Tina, both of them on their knees with gardening gloves. They planted clusters of fall mums, their bright oranges and yellows spilling warmth across the beds. The scent of freshly turned soil, mixed with the crisp tang of autumn leaves. Dig deeper, kid, Tina teased. Roots need room. Miles laughed, his voice lighter now than when he first appeared on Marjorie's porch. He brushed sweat from his forehead and pressed another plant into the ground. Guess I'm still learning. Marjorie watched from the porch, her chest tightening, not with sorrow, but with something that felt like renewal. A new branch, growing strong, unbroken. As the sun dipped low, a U-Haul rumbled down the street. Marjorie's gaze followed it as it slowed in front of her house. Derek sat behind the wheel, face set hard, Jenna beside him staring straight ahead. Their car was piled high with boxes, furniture strapped clumsily with bungee cords. The truck idled for a moment. Derek's eyes flicked toward the yard, where his son knelt in the dirt, laughing with Tina. But he didn't get out. He didn't roll down the window. He simply pressed the accelerator, and the U-Haul rolled on, turning at the corner and disappearing from sight. Marjorie exhaled slowly, her hands curling around the porch rail. The sound of the truck faded, leaving only the chirp of crickets and the soft thud of a trowel in soil. That night, with the house finally quiet, she opened her journal once more. The pages were filled with the story of the past months, the battles, the betrayals, the victories carved out of loss. She dipped her pen and wrote the closing line, the words strong, final and entirely her own. He changed the locks while I was gone, so I changed everything while he slept.